All right. So I just decided to start watching The Sopranos. Now, this is actually significant in two ways. First, I guess, is the obvious way because I'm actually very late to the game. As you know, it came out, I think it started in 1999. And then, so like I'm, I guess, 26 years late to the game. um, it's also significant in the sense that maybe it's actually significant in three ways, now that I think about it. It's also significant in the sense that I haven't watched any TV shows or any movies, really, especially TV shows, though, in a long time. And quite literally, I don't even remember the last time I watched a TV show, at least consistently. Maybe I watched like a few scattered episodes. I think I watched like the first South Park episode, maybe like a couple of the King of the Hill, but like, meh. Um, But yeah, I don't really consistently watch TV. I don't even own a television set. I just watch this on my laptop, right? Um, so yeah, that's how that is. I'm not really big into media that much. But that kind of leads to the third point, which is that I've been through kind of a dry spell when it comes to writing and reading, actually, for that matter. But I think that writing is kind of important. Um, with regards to me, I'm trying to get my books done. I have three projects. I have like an older novella that I wrote, a sci-fi horror novella. Then I have another novella that I wrote, a fantasy horror novella. That's just on the shelf for now because I don't want to work on like three things at once. Then I'm drafting Arc 2 of my actual fantasy series that I'm writing, my epic horror fantasy series. So yeah, I'm trying to wrap up that sci-fi horror. It's like in the final stages. I was hoping to get it like published by the end of this year, but that's clearly not going to happen. I was way too lazy. But we'll see if it happens at the beginning of next year, or at least the first half of next year. And then, I'm drafting Arc 2. But either way, like I was going through a dry spell, wasn't feeling very inspired. And of course, what inspires me is actually reading, but I was kind of burnt out on reading too. So I needed something to inspire me there. And so I was like, you know what? Let's just try watching something. It's much easier to watch stuff than read stuff. And maybe I could have done like an audiobook, but whatever. This time I decided to do The Sopranos. Maybe I'll switch to audiobooks later. And lo and behold, I started watching The Sopranos. And before we get into the actual show, I have started writing and also reading a lot more often, more consistently, so it actually worked. But yes, on to The Sopranos. Overall, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I like it. Um, of course, there is some of the pitfalls, like as with most TV shows, there's a lot of annoying filler, especially whole episodes that are just filler, stupid, and you could just cut it down a lot. But whatever. But all in all, it's really good. It doesn't have a lot of those annoying pitfalls of newer writing. So I think a lot of newer writing, they tend to make I think that I guess you could call them the villain characters. They tend to be more like self-insert characters, if that's how you want to put it. And they, as a result, have to soften them a bit. They make them a bit more relatable and huggable, nice, and sometimes even almost justifiable in a way. And almost like they're like apologizing for their actions. Like Yeah, and this one is one where you don't exactly get that impression, right? It's Tony Soprano is the main character, right? The basic premise is that he is a mafia boss, right? Italian American, and he is essentially the head of a crime family, and has to engage in all the usual nasty business of being a mafia boss. And of course, is there's all the associated uh, bad behavior. Of course, the murder, the money laundering, the general cruelty, the constant cheating. Yeah, the usual nastiness. And it doesn't make any apologies or excuses for his behavior. It just shows you it. It just portrays it. And and yeah, this is exactly the type of stories that I enjoy. Just the ones that just present you the character in all its glory, in all its ugliness, and then invites you to appraise them accordingly. You know, here they are, and make of them of you will as you will. And the complexity of Tony Soprano is that there is a certain cunning about him. Of course, he's very imperfect. Of course, he's in the position that he's in, but he's also has certain vulnerabilities. So he suffers from regular panic attacks. And at the very start of the series, and I mean, like, I'm pretty sure it's the very first scene, he visits a psychiatrist. And this is significant because among, gangsters, this is seen as weak. But, he decides to visit because, this panic attack is it basically comes out of nowhere and just like what the hell is happening, right? And he just doesn't know how to deal with it. And then he eventually has to go on to drugs and stuff like that. Like, by drugs, I mean Prozac. So there's a certain level of drama that comes out of that as well. Yeah, so that is the basic dynamics, but it's also a bit broader than, of course, Tony. Um, because it's about the Italian mafia. A big strong element of it is about family, right? They have a very strong familial connection. So there's the Soprano family, but also the crime family, right? Which again, you have to be part of the Italian heritage to actually fit in. Give me a second here, and I of course appreciated that. And what was interesting is how they basically took that dynamic that we all know. It goes uh, that whole crime family dynamic, and they kind of like updated it for modern times. That's essentially what it was, right? At the same time, it forced you to ask certain questions like, how would it be perceived in the modern era? And also, like, would they be able to get away with it? That was another question. And so it had interesting questions embedded within it, which may or may not blend into certain criticisms I have. And when I say criticisms, they're not like serious criticisms. It's not like a sharp critique. But we'll get to that. It also had it came out around the same time as The Wire, which I've already seen The Wire. I saw that a few years ago. So it was basically the same technological level as that time, right? So quite literally, they're using like cassette tapes and wires. You know, the wire refers to the actual wires they would use, the wiretaps they would use to um, spy on people, and that's also a fairly large component within The Sopranos itself. And also, I forgot to mention, I'm actually 2 seasons into the series at this point. I forgot to mention that, and so far, I'm not going to give any spoilers. So just to be clear, but I think I will discuss some spoilery things. But I'll give notice at the very end when I get to that point. Um, Now, for some things, I want one critique that I alluded to before that I want to get to is I was talking about how this would be updated for the modern times. So, like, how exactly the Soprano, how exactly does the Sopranos family like fit into wider society, right? Like, it's basically established that like the Soprano family is like accepted. Like everybody knows that he's like the head of the crime family. Everyone knows that. But they're all like, I guess they have like their inner family, their friends or whatever. And this is especially true with the kids, right? There's some scenes like Meadow and AJ. Those are the two kids. They have like friends, right? And like I'm often like wondering offhandedly, like what exactly are the dynamics between the kids? And sometimes they like touch upon it, right? Sometimes they vaguely touch upon it, but they never go into like very serious detail on like how it really affects their lives in ways that could be like seriously interesting. So there's not like significant plot lines for like say AJ or Meadow, right? It's more so like about Tony Soprano, and then AJ and Meadow are kind of just like orbiting them, and they kind of just come into the story at various points, right? So it's more like um, there'll be like a storyline from Tony's perspective involving Meadow, right? Like, oh, she needs to go visit a college. So Tony, of course, has to take her to the college, et cetera, et cetera. Right? There's no like established storyline from Meadow's perspective involving her dynamics with other kids at school and how she has to interact with them, given the implications of her like father being, you know, a mafia boss, and the fact that literally everyone knows it. Again, sometimes they hint at it, but it doesn't it doesn't affect it that much. And again, like there's some scenes where like she comes home like with some kids, maybe like a boyfriend or like some of her friends, and it's like what do their parents think of that, right? Like they're going to Tony Soprano's house, right? Tony Soprano's house with her friends. Like, what do her friends' parents think of that? What exactly is going on here? What are these dynamics? It would be interesting if they like built off of that. Um, yeah, so that is one critique, I guess, something that they could have built off of. And I know that I was watching, was it Charlie or Penguin Zo Z Zeros, um, or Moist Critical? That's his handle. his review, and he's always criticizing AJ because he has no plot lines, right? And he does have some, right? Like, I think his criticisms are overly harsh, but I think this is one way in which you could actually give him some storylines, is actually have build off of him in more significant ways. In fact, there was actually one significant plot line, I think, in season 1, where he was getting into like a fight with a kid, right? Actually getting into like physical altercations, right? And then I won't get into too much detail, but like the fact that Tony Soprano was a mafia boss kind of like became relevant and affected their dynamics. And again, if they kind of leaned into that a little bit more, that could be interesting. Now, I understand why they didn't lean into it that much, all that much, because like maybe it depends, right? Like, I get a feeling they could exhaust these plot lines pretty quickly, right? Like if they lean into it, they'd only have to do it for like one season and then pull out really quickly. In fact, maybe that is in fact what they did, but maybe they should have done it a little bit more. I don't know. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, by the way, let's move on to the next thing. Overall, I think that the first season in particular, I enjoyed that one much more than I did the second one. And one trivial thing I want to bring up here, just because I have it in mind and I forgot to write it down in my notes, is that something I noticed, which is kind of weird, is that they seemed a bit more careful in the writing in the first season, where when they wanted to like pass along information, they would like call the home phone and they're like, "Hey, I have a message for you. Like, go to the payphone," or something like that. So they'd hang up the phone, run out to like a payphone, pick it up, and they deliver the actual message. Excuse me. So like it's not traceable, right? And like that whole dynamic was just dropped in season 2, right? It was like a blatant absence, and like it was just so noticeable. It was like, why? Like, am I missing something? Like, what happened? It was weird. It was weird. It was very strange. And there are certain times where like Tony would be very careful with how he's speaking in order to avoid like a wire. And there are other times where they were just like talking and being more flippant. It's like, okay, so like what's going on here? So yeah, that's one thing that stood out to me. But yeah, so that's just the transition to talking about season 2, which I said I didn't like as much. It it was still good though, and I don't know if I can talk about season 2 without talking about spoilers. Yeah, I think I might need to just start talking about spoilers. So, well, let me first talk about a conversation that happened in season 1 between Tony and Meadow that is more spoilery, and then we can talk about season 2 just in full spoilers. Um, yeah, so spoilers for season 1. There's the one major conversation, or I guess it's a series of conversations between Tony and Meadow, is basically when she just flat out asks him, "Are you in the mafia?" This is probably pretty obvious, right? Um, and she was already suspicious, right? She had like straight up told AJ, "No, like he's in a fucking mafia, dude. Like, come on." And basically, they he kind of admits it without straight up saying it, right? You know, he basically admits it with this roundabout dialogue of, "Oh, you know, we do it through legal means too. Like we make money through legal means too. That's how we put it." And And then also there was the reason I want to bring it up though is because I liked how this dynamic played out, because the way it started out was with them being like open and honest with each other, right? But as things progress throughout the episode, right, like he has to carry out a hit on somebody, right? He basically recognizes some guy who basically had history with the mafia, right? And he basically has to kill him. I can't remember the specifics, but yeah, he does end up carrying out the hit, and he kills the guy. And Meadow is basically querying him, like what the fuck happened? Where'd you go? Why is there mud on your shoes? Why is there blood on your hands? And like quite literally, he had like strangled this guy. And like Tony like can't say anything. And there's also a point where she like confessed that she had used speed, or what was it, ecstasy. And he gets real angry with her, and she's like, "What? I thought we were being open and honest." But again, but either way, the point here is this: even though they were starting to be open and honest with each other, the actual brute details of like what he's doing, they actually can't talk about. You know, you can only be so honest, right? So you can only go so far. He can only allude to, hey, I'm in the mafia, but you can't actually say it. You can only connect with your daughter so much given your lifestyle. There are limits, right? So all this babble in the early part of the episode about actually connecting with your daughter, actually being open and honest with each other, it was a lie, essentially, and that his lifestyle is inherently a closeted one, more or less. And you kind of see that reflected later in the series too, where, I mean, he can't even talk about the specifics with his wife. I mean, his wife knows about it. But again, if he talks about murder, with her, like, he'll make her an accessory after the fact, right? That's how he put it, right? So yeah, I thought that was a cool little dynamic there. So that's a bit of praise. I wanted to bring that up. Okay, so moving on to season 2, though. And most of this is going to be criticisms. Again, overall, I liked season 2, but in contrast to season 1, I thought it was a bit weaker. And here are the reasons why. So, as you know, from at the end of season 1, we saw that Junior ordered a hit on Tony. And this was at the manipulations of Olivia, which is Tony's mother. And I kind of just, like, that relationship between Tony and Junior was kind of just brushed over a bit too easily in season 2. Now, I get that, like, men don't tend to, like, let their grudges sit between them very long. Like men tend to be like high impact violence and struggle, and then they can come to a truce, right? Pretty easily. But even then, like this was more like, okay, like maybe this could have been tweaked a little bit to have them like kind of understand like what is going on here. Have them like talk it out a little bit more. And I kind of got the impression, I kept going back to this, like are they going to touch upon this more? But they kind of didn't. It literally just felt like they brushed it aside. Things just kind of kept moving along, and they gradually kind of forgot about it, right? And it kept it. And what really highlighted it was just the fact that Tony has this serious grudge against his mother, but not with Junior. And maybe this is kind of the point. Maybe like Junior, he expects it, right? Like it's all part of the business, it's all part of the game. They don't call it the game. I think that's from like The Wire, right? But it's expected, right? They're in a power struggle. Okay, yeah, sure. You put out a hit on me. So what? I would have killed you. You would have killed me. Whatever. But at the very least, like put in a conversation that kind of alludes to that fact. You don't literally have to like put dialogue in there saying that explicitly. Like I understand, like show don't tell. I understand that you don't want to like be overt and ham-fisted about it, but either way, yeah, that was one thing that stuck out to me, and the contrast with Livia, his reaction to Livia or his mother, kind of just highlighted just how much that stuck out to me. It was very much it kind of like, right, maybe we should touch upon this, touch it up a little bit, touch up the writing. Now, that said, later in the series, there was one part where Junior decides, like, he was scheming originally with Richie. Richie was trying to get Junior to have Tony assassinated a second time, right? And Junior's like, okay, so go to try to convince. But, Junior's, like, in a inferior position now. Like, all his subordinates have been killed off by Tony. We saw them all get killed off in the first season, right? So he's in a subordinate position. He's under house arrest. So he's basically says, okay, Richie, go get allies. Go convince them onto your side. And if you can do that, we'll put a hit on Tony. And and then like what happens is that they basically reject Richie. And Junior's like, damn it. What can we do? I'll think about it. And then eventually he's just like, all right, so the mere fact that Richie doesn't command respect, or the mere fact that he can't convince these people, shows that he can't command respect. Therefore, I should back Tony, despite my problems with him. And then he literally goes to Tony and says, hey, Richie wants to put out a hit on you. We should kill him. Man, that was great. That was great. Yeah. So really, to be fair, with Junior and Tony, it really is all about the game. So I think the groundwork is there for them to let bygones be bygones. It is for men. It's all about the game, right? It's nothing personal, but yeah. So I did like that. Now that kind of leads into the next critique, though, is that for the Richie plot line and Janice, I thought that was resolved a bit too neatly. It was almost like a Deus Ex Machina, right? The way Janice just shot Richie. And then, as a result, Tony just covers up the murder, and then she just goes away. Bye-bye. And it's like, those whole plot lines just disappear? Like, really? It was like a gift wrapped in, like, tie up the knot. Bye-bye. And I get that they wanted to, like, change things up, you're right. Like, they didn't want to just end that storyline with Richie just being hit. They wanted to spice it up by having something wacky happen, I guess, story-wise. But I don't know, like this kind of creativity was a little bit off the wall. It was a bit of like, admittedly, it was a bit of black comedy, but it was the way they wrapped it up. It was like there was two finales to season two, right? There was like the Richie Janice finale. Then after that, there was the pussy finale, the Salvatore finale. Should I call it that? The pussy finale. Yes, there's the Richie finale and the pussy finale. And of course that leads to the last criticism is that I didn't really appreciate the pussy finale either, and that was the way that was written, right? And what I'm finding is that I don't like dream sequences very much. It's not that I don't like them on principle, because at that point I would just be a hypocrite. Like I've literally written dream sequences. In fact, the book working on right now, like that sci-fi horror novel I mentioned at the beginning of this video, literally has one. Actually, I'm pretty sure it has two. Um, but it depends on how you use them, and like the way they use the dream sequence in this, where it just like he just has like a series of like fever dreams, and then just like learns or realizes that Pussy is a mole, spying for the FBI. Just was like, it felt like lazy writing. It was like a shoehorn, right? Like it's like they couldn't be bothered to have him realize by more clever means, right? It's like, oh my god, how do we contrive a means for by which Tony realizes that Pussy is doing something, right? To compromise the family. Oh, I know. He'll just have a fever dream. He's talking to a fucking fish that has Pussy's voice, and he's buggering them out over the FBI. It's just like what? Really? Is that it? So that was, yeah, that was really annoying, honestly. That was very, as I said, very lazy. It was just very lazy writing. Don't you think you could contrive a better way to come up with a reveal? Right? You could compare it to, for example, Breaking Bad. Right? Sometimes people like poke fun at the the Walt Whitman Leaves of Grass book, right? When Hank finally finds out that Walt is Heisenberg. It's Leaves of Grass sitting on the toilet back, and he just picks it up, opens it up, sees Gail Bedeker's handwriting, "To my other WW." And he like freaks out, like, holy shit, like what is this? And it's like, and then people like follow it up with like, well, why would Walt like leave the Leaves of Grass thing on there? Well, like to be fair, like that's just like an absent-minded thing. Like maybe he just forgot that Gail Bedeker left it there, right? He didn't really expect Hank to make all those connections. Just think about all of the underlying connections that you'd have to have at the back of your head, right? Like he recognized Gail Bedeker's handwriting. That's how he made the connection, right? Did Walt anticipate that Hank would memorize Gail Bedeker's fucking handwriting? And well, I guess it's more than just the handwriting. It was also the "To my other WW," that particular conversation. So to be fair, but Either way, it was still like an absent-minded thing. And it was like a cosmic thing, like a cosmic slip-up, in a way. And that was kind of the point. And I think that is good writing. I think that is good writing. It's because it was like a callback to something that happened in, like, was it like season 3? Where they just contrived like this astronomically like unlikely sequence of events. Like all the dominoes had been set up, right? And then they just tipped it over and everything comes crashing down. And then yeah, the Sopranos are just like, oh yeah, just give them a fever dream, guys. And yeah, Big Pussy will, yeah, wasn't there a little pussy in the first season? I can't remember. Yeah, but either way, Pussy speaks in a fish form to him. Just like, okay. Like, at the very least, lay out the logic of the realization. Right? Why did he come to suspect him? Right? What compelled him? Right? I don't get it. But no, it was just the authorial hand. I could see the authorial hand reaching through the screen, telling Tony, hey, Pussy did it! It's my fucking hand reaching into the pussy. Okay. Well, that's my last complaint. Either way, those are some complaints. Like, overall, I still liked the series. And I still liked the season overall. It's not like I dislike it. No, now that I say that, I thought of another thing that did bug me. Is I didn't like how Olivia was sidelined in season 2. Right, she just kind of got shunted aside. It's like what happened? Like, where'd she go? But whatever. The whole idea of, either way, the whole idea of them having the deal with Pussy at the end was still very good. I still want to emphasize that. The final scene of them having to actually like shoot him, kill him, deal with him was very compelling. Right? Him like trying to, him asking for like the bottle of tequila, and then him trying to share that story of was it the Brazilian girl or some like South American girl, and how he was getting laid or whatever, and then they're all laughing, and then Tony's like, does that girl even exist? Like cutting through the bullshit. And then, like the vibe just changes. And it's just like, and you could just see it on his face. He's like, I'm getting shot. and he's just like, don't do it in my face, please. And it literally, it reminds me of The Wire, right? It kind of reminds me of, well, actually, I don't want to give any spoilers to The Wire. But yeah, so let's leave that aside. But it does remind me of The Wire, just the brutal realism of The Wire. So yeah, The Sopranos up through season 2, so far so good. And I'm going through it very slowly. I'm literally watching like one episode per day, if that. So yeah, muy bueno. I can't speak Italian, so.
I have now released both volumes of The Paths We Have Taken, which is the first arc in the Broken Reality. This is my grim, dark, epic horror fantasy series. It takes the political intrigue of A Song of Ice and Fire, the abrasive characterization of Abercrombie, the long-term storytelling of One Piece, and the philosophical horror of the Second Apocalypse to explore the human capacity for cruelty. Check it out if you are interested.